I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. Today, I am joined once again by one of my absolute favorite and most insightful guests, somebody who I talk to behind the scenes constantly, especially after last weekend's game against the Rams. There were a lot of questions about the Patriots coaching, the execution, everything under the sun, and we talked about it behind the scenes, and I'm saying, you know what? Why not bring this conversation to the people, have kind of a state of the union for the Patriots when it comes to not only the coaching staff, but the roster, what things we can be optimistic about and what things may need improvement. But without further ado, my good friend, former NFL pro scout and Madden ratings adjuster, Andre Weingarten, welcome back to the show, brother. Thank you so much for being back. Before we get into all the nitty gritty of the Patriots, I got to start with how the heck are you doing? What's new in your life?
I'm doing great, man. Outside of just enjoying a good season, obviously the results haven't been what we have looked for the Patriots in terms of win-loss record, but still a lot of exciting stuff there. Great high school football season. Doing coaching defensive backs, game day scouting, game day decision making, stuff like that. Talking with the defensive coordinator throughout the game, head coach, stuff like that. So yeah, we had a good season. It didn't end the way we wanted. We ended up losing to the 2 seed in their house, but it was a really, really good year. Always sad to see the seniors go, but wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's awesome, brother. Actually, before we get started, quick question. What is one thing about coaching and coming up with a game plan that you don't think gets enough appreciation from all of us on the outside?
I think, and I think this plays out at the high school level, but I think it plays out in general, is that you can only put in plays that your guys can execute. You can try doing those other things, but there's a certain mental load that every player, and it differs per person, per player, per age, that they can handle. So whether you see guys in different roles, you see some guys who are slot only guys, some guys who play outside and play in the slot, different responsibilities, all of that. It's just figuring out, we really like this play, but he can't do it in practice. So if he can't do it in practice and he's the crux of this play, either we put someone else there or we just scrap it and do something else. So I think it's that constant chess match back and forth. And I think you see that in the NFL a lot. Sometimes with roles that certain guys play, a lot of times with quarterbacks and or wide receivers. Sometimes you see those guys who just play all over the field. They do all the different things. And you're like, wow, this guy, he's really versatile. But I don't think people recognize just how much mentally they go through to be that good at so many different things.
Like putting players in the best position to succeed. We hear it all the time, and you think, put the X at X because that's his skill set. And it's not always just that. It's also, like you said, can this person handle the workload that we're actually giving them? This is already off to a great start. We're already getting into some real philosophical stuff, but let's dive into the Patriots, my friend, and start at the very top of the organization with new head coach Jerod Mayo. First, obviously, my style. Spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So start out with the positives. What about Jerod Mayo in this coaching staff? Obviously, a ton of inexperience. You got first-year play caller and Alex Van Pelt, the first-year defensive coordinator in DeMarcus Covington, as well as obviously the first-year head coach and everybody else under them. What have you liked that you've seen so far from this coaching staff?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the defensive side of the ball. Even if the game plan each week doesn't start out the strongest, and sometimes it's been better than others, they make really good adjustments in real time. With the front, with the personnel that they have, which, that's an uphill battle in the NFL, especially with all the injuries that happen. Getting guys back has helped in some regard, but especially earlier in the season. You could just see that sometimes they were a little bit overwhelmed physically, and they made some adjustments to try and counter that, whether it's shifting a guy's technique inside or just running different coverages, trying to limit explosive plays when they gave up a big one. So I'm very positive there, and very positive for the offensive side, that they are aware of their offensive line issues, and they have mitigated that in the passing game in a way that I did not expect after seeing it early on, and basically having a functional offense without a run game.
And now I'm curious. So we'll start with the offense because obviously the run game's gotten a little better, a little bit more respectful. That's allowed them to actually open up the playbook because, as we know, it not only shrinks your playbook, makes it so much harder on all the players when the defense doesn't respect the threat of the run. So what exactly, more specifically, were some of those adjustments you saw, especially when they weren't able to run the ball as effectively?
Yeah, I mean, they're still using play action a lot. I think that's something that is a newer field of thought, whether a coach would admit it publicly or not. Play action has worked and works when under center, regardless of how good you are running the football, especially outside zone lateral runs. Because you are hiding the ball and you are forcing linebackers to flow in a direction that is away from their actual linebacker positioning so you can throw behind them. If you do right under center and it's a gap scheme and it's right up the middle in the A gap, they just need to retreat. So they're still in those windows in a way that's easier to just, oh, we're just falling back and we're still watching you versus trying to keep track as you're working laterally and you're not as fast and you're not as fluid. So they've done a really good job there. I think doing more quick game, I think Drake has done a very good job with the quick game in a way that Jacoby was hesitant at times. And they're willing to take shots. They're willing to keep teams honest in a way that, again, Jacoby, he is tied for the best interception percent in NFL history. And part of that is because he is not always aggressive, despite being a naturally good deep ball thrower over his career. There were a couple of years that he was literally top 3, multiple years, where he was top 3 in the NFL as a deep ball thrower. And he became a little bit more conservative. So you can kind of shrink the field defensively. But now, even these tight window throws, like the ones that we see to Kayshon Boutte that he didn't catch, hit him. He had to adjust. It's a tough play. It was blanket coverage, and he had to adjust for it. But you can't just sit on all of these underneath routes the same way when they're showing that they're willing to take those shots, even with tight coverage.
And the way that defenses have played the Patriots historically until the Drake May era is completely flipped. For years, it's been we're loading the box, we're playing man coverage because we don't think that you can separate. Now, you still get a lot of that, but you also see way more of defenses saying we're going to sit back in 2 high shells and we're going to try to be respectful in our rush lanes because we cannot let Drake May kill us over the top or just run as much as he wants. And also, you mentioned the quick game. That was the area where I was the most critical of Drake May because I feel like that underneath accuracy was pretty spotty. We saw it, his first NFL interception. Going into the game, I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want to jinx it, but in my head, I'm like, it's going to be like Brady in those Super Bowls where he's just going to get excited. He's going to throw a pretty ugly pick. You deal with it because he's going to settle in and figure it out. And then once it happened, I'm like, it's okay. I knew it was happening. I don't mind. It sucks. Move on. It's the first quarter. That's okay. But really, you've seen week to week, he's gotten significantly better. And over the past couple weeks, you haven't seen the really weird spray misses that I kind of figured would be a staple of his rookie season. That accuracy has really come together. And then also, I'm kind of curious on the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned the adjustments that they've made. The biggest thing I've noticed is they've gone away from the big nickel, partially because of Kyle Duggar, but I also think part of it had to do with Keon White being on the inside, obviously. He mentioned his role is scaled back that way. And even sometimes Jelani Chabai not being quite as firm on the edge. And now we're seeing more base with 3 safeties. It did get picked apart in the passing game against the Rams. I figured that was really more execution than always scheme. But what did you think about that? And also, what else have you seen them kind of get away from and add to their defense as the season's gone on?
Yeah, before we jump into that real quick, just one last note. They faced 33% man coverage with Jacoby Brissett, and they've faced 24% since Drake May has come in. So you can't play as much man coverage. And the wide receivers have been playing better. I think that's a big factor, especially Kayshon Boutte, who's emerged as a guy who can actually beat man coverage, which is definitely a nice change of pace. But you can't turn your back on Drake May in coverage because he will run on you. And he has shown that he's so elusive in the pocket, poised as well, that he'll step up and he'll climb rather than always bailing out the side. So, yeah. But back to the defense, I think the big thing is they just do a good job of trying to – I think they've toughened up a little bit. I think there was that reality check after Mayo said that they played soft. And you could see it. They were really just not – they didn't look engaged the same way that we've seen in the past few weeks. I think you see a little bit more energy in general. And I think just everybody's feeling a little bit more locked in. I think the other corners have done their part a little bit better. Obviously, it's still an area of weakness, but I think personnel-wise, just getting as many healthy bodies back in, I think getting Barmore back, oh my God, from an emotional standpoint, no matter what happens on the field, because I thought he did still bring some extra presence there. But I think just having him back in that room, his football IQ, the emotional feel of having him back has been a huge lift for them. And I think it's going to carry them throughout the rest of the season because, I mean, I didn't think they played a terrible game against the Rams by any stretch. Stafford's a pro. I thought some of the schematic decision-making was more problematic, like some of the base stuff against the 2 wide receiver sets and not floating guys over to maintain disguise. Like you can do some things there.
I agree, especially in the red zone. I didn't agree what they were doing against some of those wing formations at all.
Yeah, like they seemed unprepared for it a little bit, which is the sign of a young staff. Because even if a team has never done it before, you need to be able to prepare for something like that. And McVay has gone a lot more 12 personnel in the past 2 years than he had in years prior. So they've been trending in this direction anyway. You should kind of expect something along those lines. And I think they've done a decent amount of wing before. The counter stuff, I know you've seen those videos, the counter and the power stuff that they were doing.
Cool. Cool.
Really good stuff from them. But it's like that is a very good counter for 2-gap, even if the Patriots' bodies, when they were in those spots, did a better job, right? Because the blocking scheme was good and it worked, and Kyron Williams made some plays, but New England was firm, and they made some of those adjustments to try and limit that damage. So, like you face a good offense with one of the best schemers in the league, and you come out with 28 points with, some really ridiculous plays made by Stafford and company. And then some of those unforced, like the big Cooper Kupp touchdown was unnecessary. Having Kupp with Keon White shading over him in the slot in base and trying to blitz off that side and that's a pre-snap check. That's a pre-snap check in high school. That's not even that's just it's bad stuff, and it's trying to do a little too much to try and confuse a veteran. But I think just in general, there have been a lot of good learning experiences, and we don't see them make the same mistakes twice.
It reminded me a lot of the Geno Smith game, where you come away saying that is, like you said, that's a professional quarterback who made several wild plays where you kind of throw your hands up and say, like, what are you really supposed to do? There was also an element of, the coaching staff, when it came to trying to get tricky or trying to get aggressive, went too far, and then you got burned by it, like with the DK Metcalf touchdown. You're trying to disguise cover 2. There's a miscommunication. He literally, just like Cooper Kupp, ends up basically walking into the end zone by the time he passes midfield. And also just individual execution, where you're saying there were busted coverages, players could have been better, and it was just kind of a combination of coaching needed to improve, execution needed to be better, but also you're playing a really good team with good coaching and a good quarterback with 2 talented receivers. These are the things that are going to happen to you. Now, we've obviously already kind of dipped into this, but now on the flip side of that coin, what are some things from this coaching staff, be it Mayo, Van Pelt, Covington, anyone under them, or any combination of those people, that you haven't really liked what you've seen so far and you would like to see improvement?
Yeah, I think the first part is definitely the in-game decision-making by Mayo. 4th down points, it makes sense that a traditional defensive coach would be a little bit more traditionally defensive in his decision-making, right? You want to set your defense up for success because you want to get that stop, and you trust your guys, and you do that. But I think that's a bit of a foolish thought in some situations where, like, inside the 5-yard line, inside your opponent's 5-yard line on 4th down and kicking. Because what you're saying is these 3 points are going to be a difference maker for us in a way that a touchdown might not be, or getting the ball back and getting a second shot at it. Because basically right then and there, if you go for it, you're not only trusting your offense, but you're trusting your defense if your offense doesn't get the job done. So you're showing total trust in your players if you go that approach, rather than basically saying, well, they stopped us, we're going to just take the 3 and move on. And then doing that specifically in the Rams game to make it a 9-point game?
Yeah.
And they did that. The problem with that is And same thing with PATs in general, right? When you get into those situations, you are basically saying we need to get a stop or the game's over.
Mhm.
And that's football. But when you get into that 2-point situation, what ends up happening is you're up 9, or sorry, you're down 9, and you get a touchdown. So you can kick the PAT and you get to 8, or you go for 2 and you get to 7, or you fail, right? Like that's math.
That's the math.
If you get 8, you still need a stop, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and another stop to win the game. You cannot win the game with another touchdown and 2-point conversion. It is impossible. If you get it, it's a 7-point game. You only need one stop, and then you can go for it for the win, or just a standard touchdown and go for it. If you fail, you're in the same exact position as you would be for that stop, touchdown, or points in general. The only difference is you're not going to overtime, where you have no control over a coin toss. So the difference between 8 and 9 is negligible. The difference between 8 or 9 and 7 is monumental. And I think that's an area that as a coach, he needs to be a little bit more aware of. And he doesn't really have a reason to be afraid. He's not on the hot seat. Unless there's something that we don't know about behind the scenes, which I don't believe to be the case.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
You are an underdog team that is playing to expectation, actually probably a little bit above expectation because of what Drake May is doing on offense. There's no reason to be so conservative in your decision-making, because what's the blowback? That you trusted your sensational rookie quarterback to make an additional play? Like it doesn't, that's an area that he can't get scared from. And there are great coaches who are bad decision makers. Andy Reid is one of them. Love him to death. Kyle Shanahan. Sean McVay for the longest time, terrible decision maker. Passive. All three of them. Some of the best offensive coaches in the league are not well-rounded in that regard. So I think that's an area that Mayo specifically can improve. And I think just having a say and being a little bit more multiple with the personnel, both offensive and defensive. Come up with more packages for specific players. I think we saw it with Marcus Jones.
Antonio Gibson.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Like put guys who are athletes in positions to succeed. And I think that's that Marcus Jones whole situation where, report came out where he called AVP. He's like, by the way, I can play a little bit of offense. He was a slot guy in college at Houston on top of being a very good defensive player. And he's obviously an excellent return man. When he was with New England in 2022, he wasn't running a full route tree. He wasn't really an offensive player. He was, he's on the field. Watch out for that guy because he could catch it. And when he has the ball, he's explosive. Like they have actual offensive players who play the position full time, who can be put in those positions. It's basically saying, I am going to dedicate a touch to this guy. This is the primary read. It's the same thing as a run play. It's the same thing as the primary read on a slant, right? Front side slant. You do dragon spacing. It's slant flat. What's your read? That's the guy I want to get the ball to. A shot play. It's all the same concept as a coach. Mm-hmm. I want to put this guy in a position to make a play. So why not do it more with guys who are athletes? I love Austin Hooper. I've loved Austin Hooper since he was in Atlanta. Do I want him getting a designed bootleg in the flat over Jaheim Bell? Just from if someone is chasing him perspective, who do I think will outrun them? And that's the answer. Like, I don't want that to be the guy who is the possession receiver. Obviously, you want to reward him for all of his effort as a blocker,
right?
And everything.
And that's what it feels like, right? In those opportunities, yeah.
But like, there are better ways than catch and run situations to reward him. Like, if you wanted to do that, you put him on a hitch at the sticks, right? You have Stick and you have him as the primary guy, and you don't have Hunter Henry as the primary guy, right? Like, there's ways. You don't need to basically throw him a bone to put the team behind the sticks. And I think that's an area that it's kind of the antithesis of what AVP and what Stefanski and LaFleur like to do. They are plays over players as a concept. And I think you could be a little bit more nuanced in that.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. That's it. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. So when your pick hits, you can get your money as quick as 15 minutes. And how about this? Prize Picks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
I agree. One of the more disappointing things with Van Pelt's system, and I'm trying to give him slack because he's here to develop Drake May. Right, create a system that allows him to play to his strengths, obviously build camaraderie, which I think really gets overlooked, where it's one of those things where it's not tangible. You don't see it you can see it on the game field, actually, with the pickups and everything. Frankly, I noticed that in week 1, where I'm like, every time Ramondre has gotten tackled, someone has picked him up. I feel like I haven't noticed that before. And I said, that's something that sends a message to the other team. Lo and behold, we find out over 10 weeks later, that was actually something they were tracking where, those things I think matter. And those are the things where, yes, they're the things he doesn't do schematically. But I'm saying for a franchise where you had coaches that weren't happy with each other, coaches arguing with the front office, quarterbacks and like a head coach that weren't talking, and quarterbacks wanting to be in different rooms during meetings, like, I feel like people forget just how toxic things were getting in New England last year. And one of the main points that Mayo had when he took over was, we want to build this new culture and, have the players know we respect them. And that's all we've heard. So those are the things where I'm saying, okay, it's not the most nuanced offense. The most important things long-term, Alex Van Pelt is doing. That said, the use of personnel, there's definitely been times where I'm like, not a lot of creativity. You guys say that your X and Z are the same thing, but it's pretty clear who's the X, who is the Z on every single play. There's not a whole lot of, this guy's here, like you'd see with Josh McDaniels. And again, even if he was the coordinator, like one thing I'm learning on the fly is that, you can be the coordinator, but when you work under someone like Kevin Stefanski, their voice is so loud that really a lot of that might not be you specifically. It may be something that you're kind of doing because you're told. So I try to give Alex Van Pelt some grace, but I agree. I would like to see more creativity and better use of personnel in some ways. But going back to Mayo especially, like you said, all the best head coaches, a lot of them also have some pretty glaring red flags, like with Andy Reid, it's clock management. With Kyle Shanahan, it's also clock management in the Super Bowl when he has a lead. Gerard doesn't bring the same things as those guys do, though, right? He's not a Dan Campbell where sure he'll go for a 4th down. He shouldn't, but also he has the track record of success and constant growth where now it's justified. Do you see anything with Mayo that justifies the idea that he should be potentially one and done, or maybe even if it's not way better next year, he is on the hot seat? I think maybe 2 years is where, if it's still bad, you maybe start to have the conversation, but I just don't see Robert Kraft being the kind of guy who's willing to fire really anybody on the staff unless they've either lost the players or don't show any sign of growth.
Yeah. I think the big thing when it comes to a defensive-minded coach is that you want incredible effort from your players. And I think they are getting that. I think that's the big thing. Mayo was a no-nonsense player. He's a no-nonsense coach in that same regard. He's kinder than what Belichick was. And I think players have resonated with someone who basically learned what he didn't like from the coaching style of the best coach ever and is trying to be his own person in a way that I don't think Matt Patricia or Brian Flores in his first stint necessarily were able to achieve. I think Flores has learned that in Minnesota, and it's why he's thriving over there and might get a new head coaching opportunity. But I don't think there's anything that jumps out to me that says Gerard Mayo couldn't be a long-term player for the Patriots, long-term fit in the fold for them, because I do think the culture is strong, right? I think that's the big thing. And I think culture is a nebulous term, as you mentioned. I think the big thing is when you have a toxic environment, preparation is not fun. Games are the games, right? These guys will go out there and they will do their thing. But are they as engaged in the film room as they should be? Are they engaged in practice? Are they thinking about other things? Then game day comes and they're mentally not as prepared. They're not at full strength. This is a team that has some talent limitations, but I do not question the effort or the preparedness of them on a game-to-game basis. And I think that's really important. And that is both a Mayo thing, that is an AVP thing, that's a Covington thing, and that's a team leader thing on both sides of the football. And I think Drake is doing a tremendous job with that as well. That he is a CEO type at quarterback in a way that you don't usually see young players. And I think you can see that in some other cities right now, that the team isn't as bought into what the quarterback is doing because he's leading by example. And I think that's a big deal. And that is not, alone with rookies, right? I think just in general, you can see places that are bought in and those that are a little skeptical. And the players, from everything I've seen, they love Drake to death. He puts in the work and he trusts his guys. I know you retweeted something you tweeted something that I retweeted about Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry and the differences between Brady and there's a lot there. So back to your original question, I don't think it would take Robert Kraft having a pulse in the locker room that something has soured, I think, for him to say that Mayo is done. I think he knows that this is going to be a rebuild. And it's hard to watch a rebuild, but there's more hope now than there has been in the past few years for him, right? He's up there in years, but I think you can even see his excitement in the box is different now than it has been in the past. And I think when you tie all those things together, I think he's going to give him a little bit longer of a leash, especially for how long he's been trying to get him.
And when it comes to the frustration with Mayo, I do understand it. The media stuff, that has obviously started from the offseason because he had to burn some cash. He's very new at that. He wants to be transparent. He wants to be himself, but there is a limit to what you can do. Or Stacey's had to pull back on him and be like, you know what? You're going to do the Bill intros where you talk about the team so that we can eat a whole chunk of time at the beginning of the press conference and make sure you can't just be bombarded with questions or put yourself in bad positions. I understand the frustration there. You pair that with some questionable in-game decision-making. For a first-year head coach, I don't think people would care quite as much if it wasn't all the things that are kind of compounded in the fact they're losing. And then obviously you also have the times where Mayo has to call his team out because he's saying, by our metrics of toughness, running the ball, stopping the run, covering kicks, we're not doing that. That's a recipe where, people are going to get frustrated because you, by your own admission, are not living up to your standards. And sometimes it's not as easy to see the growth from week to week. But at the end of the day, and it's not like other Patriots defenses where at the end of the game, they're getting the stop they need. You know it. They may struggle in the middle. Maybe, they give up a touchdown on the first drive. They're going to figure it out. It's been more ebbs and flows this season, especially earlier on. You saw this isn't the same Patriots defense. They will give up a touchdown late in the game that kind of puts their offense in an almost impossible spot, and they don't have that kind of life raft as an offense. But especially in the past couple of weeks, you see Jonathan Jones, maybe the worst game he's had in half a decade, ends up getting the pass breakup at the end of the game that gives the offense a chance to win. The run defense against the Jaguars, as bad as they were getting punched in the mouth, run after run after run in the fourth quarter. But when they need that fourth down stop, they're able to get it and they toughen up. And obviously, over time, the levees kind of broke, but you can still see the resilience in the defense specifically. And then the offense, they have the benefit of Drake May, but he gives them just enough where they really do believe when they're on the field, we have a chance to go down and score because he could literally throw a touchdown on any given play. So it's one thing if you're dealing with a Mac Jones or a Bailey Zappi and you're like, I don't really know about this. I don't really trust this guy that much. But with what Drake May gives that locker room, you have defenders saying I know we're losing and I know it's odd, but we really are not giving up. We believe in what we have here. We have the talent. I think that's huge. Now, moving from the coaching staff to the roster, obviously we talked about Drake May, and I'm sure we'll talk about Drake May much more in this category, but who are some players on this roster that give you hope in the future, where obviously there are a lot of holes on this team, but I don't know how I have an idea how you feel, but I feel personally there are more truly talented foundational pieces that I think they get credit for, where if you take advantage of the draft capital, you've got all this money, and you have Drake May where people are saying, I want to play with that guy. You really are potentially one off season away from being a legitimate playoff contender.
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a bit of talent. I would say that overall there are more league replacement level players playing now than I would hope. But I know we've talked a little bit offline about it. Obviously, Barmore and Keon White are both sensational players, really fun, interesting guys. Anthony Jennings, very good edge setter. I'm still a huge fan of Kyle Duggar. I like Mapu as a true safety, not so much in the box as much. I know that was his billing coming out, that he was kind of that hybrid player, but I think you need a dedicated role for him. Christian Gonzalez is phenomenal. One of the most talented players in the league at the position, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, just truly sensational stuff from him. Week in, week out.
The defense for me, to be honest, where it's like all the tools, crazy work ethic, incredibly smart. It's just like there's not a whole lot of knocks.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about guys who can do everything that you need from a corner position, you could argue that his tackling probably still needs to be improved a little bit. It's gotten better, but that's not, that's a small thing for a corner because it's more run fit tackling than it is bringing down a guy in space. There are very few corners who have his measurables, his change of direction, and his just overall, natural feel for the game. I mean, literally, there are maybe 5 guys who have all of those things in the sport, and 3 of them are consistently injury prone. So, there's a very short list of guys. Maybe there's someone in a scheme that plays better here or there, but that list is shrinking. That list is shrinking quick. And that's just on the defensive side. Offensively, Mike Onwenu's here for the long haul. Obviously not having his best season, with a lot of work around him that, needs some time. Fedarian Lowe has been incredible, really out of nowhere at that left tackle spot. Michael Jordan has been a very good pass protector. Obviously the run game woes are in part because of just the lack of push from him and Brown and DeMontre Jacobs at the right tackle spot. But, that's a very reassuring group in pass protection at times. I'm a huge believer in Jalen Polk. Obviously,
say it louder. People think he's a bust after 11 weeks of an NFL season.
I know. He is trying to do way too much. The one thing I'll say is he is the type of player that can have a Devontae Adams career arc. Adams was almost run out of Green Bay as a rookie, as a second-round pick out of Fresno State. And he had the drops, he had the mental issues, he had everything. He didn't look explosive, he didn't look confident. And he developed into one of the best wide receivers of a generation. Will Jalen Polk reach that ceiling? Time will tell. But if you want to talk about guys who have started low, who did not have the expectations, because no one, if anyone thought Devontae Adams was going to be the best receiver for a 4-year period in the NFL, he's not lasting till he lasted in the draft, right? Like, that's just not happening.
Exactly.
So, but for Polk, I think he's young. He just needs to calm down. And I think he's going to do that. He's going to improve because we've seen him do it. Right. Unlike other busts where you're like, yeah, this guy was good in some areas, not so good in other areas. And that became a much glaring issue in the NFL. He was a really good, well-rounded, consistent, safe player. He was a Robert Woods caliber player in college and as a projection with that toughness. And he plays tough. It's just so, and I'm coming around on Boutte as well. And I'm a huge Pop Douglas fan. Pop, his big thing is his injury consistency, but I'm a sucker for a slot receiver as a long-term Patriots fan. I've seen so many of them that have just become fan favorites and just taken all those hits and come back for more. But I mean, it's a young receiving group that, I mean, the oldest one of them is Pop, and he's 24 of those 3 that I just named.
Yeah, those 3, yeah. And then you got Kendrick Bourne, obviously, on the other end of the spectrum, but obviously the guys that are really in the rotation, very young, very inexperienced.
Right. So it's like, this takes time. This takes a veteran quarterback, and it takes reps. Are they going to find all the soft spots in all the zones? Are they going to be able to run a Z as an X, as a Y? Are they going to be able to do all of that? No, that's not going to happen. You're drinking through a fire hose as a rookie, especially at wide receiver, especially if there's option routes, which almost every offense has to some extent. Pop Douglas this week, right? The ball up the seam. He never looked back for it. That's a miscommunication. Do I know personally whether that was a Drake or a Pop Douglas thing? No. Based on the location, he expected him in one spot. He wasn't there.
And Polk told us today, actually, he said Drake was thrown in the right spot. And even Demario Douglas said when he explained it, he's like, I was running my route. Drake tried to take the blame and put it on himself. Van Pelt was like, yeah, that ball was in the right spot. Drake saw it the right way. And to your point, when I asked Drake, like, how do you process these defenses? He said, sometimes guys are trying to run the route that's on the page. And sometimes I'm like, hey, you just got to play ball. And like you said, it's time, it's experience, having those conversations where it looks ugly in a game, but you're like, hey, next time that happens, we're going to be on the same page. And as that builds over 3, 4, however many years, and like with Rodgers and Dante Adams, a lot of that was chemistry and being like, all right, we know what each other's going to do. That breeds confidence. And that's where you start seeing those receiving cores where it's like, you can't really stop them because it doesn't matter what you run. They understand the weaknesses and how to attack them.
'Tis the most wonderful time of the year. Yes, the NBA season, folks. It is the best. Look, the NFL is great. I understand. But if you're looking into star power, celebrity, entertainment, it's the NBA. There's no doubt about it. And my Celtics, I'm looking for them to defend. We need a new dynasty in the NBA. We need one. Okay, and I think this Celtic group can do it. I know the Celtic group can do it. And you know who else, from what I understand, is a Celtic fan? Is Hugh Jackman. Yes, Wolverine himself, the greatest showman, Hugh Jackman is a big Celtic fan. And if you're like us and you want to check out the Celtics or maybe any other team that happens to be coming to town to try to knock off the kings of the NBA, the Celtics, make sure you go to Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Now, Game Time, and you can get your Celtics tickets there. It's really easy to do. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier because Game Time Picks filters out the fluff, right, to show you incredible deals and great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Like when I go to my Game Time app, it says Celtics game right there. Boom, pops up, how much the price is. I'm ready to go. It's as simple as that. They have super deals. They're as good as it gets. Check it out on the Game Time app. And again, I can't emphasize how easy it is, even for an idiot like me. You download the app, it's got a G on it for Game Time. You just click it on. You can designate where you want to go, what you want to do. You can, favorite your games and your cities and so forth. And it pops up on the screen. You click it on, and there you go. And you're off and running. It's as simple as that. They also have curated deals that make it easy to find best prices and great seats. They have the super deal. And I love this part. You know the view of your seats before you buy them. You know what you're getting. And it has the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and so much more. So, Game Time Picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on concerts, comedy, theater, sports. Oh, speaking of concerts, Coldplay coming to Gillette Stadium in July of 2025. Tickets are already up on Game Time. Not bad either. Not bad at all. And the Jingle Ball Kiss, the iHeart Jingle Ball at the Garden, you can get tickets on that too. And they always have big stars around Christmas time. So all-in pricing, toggling, they call it toggling. It shows you everything up front. No surprise fees at checkout. And I mentioned the seat views, great panoramic views, so you know you're buying. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
Yeah, we saw it this week. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Matthew Stafford. They know each other like the backs of each other's hands. Kupp and Stafford are best friends. right? Like that's what it is. It's just you build that chemistry. You know what the other one's thinking before they do it. You see it with Mahomes and Kelsey. You saw it briefly with Brady and Antonio Brown, right? Like that was an immediate connection that these two just saw the sport in the same way, both savants in their own regard. Obviously, Antonio Brown had his own issues that derailed him. But like you can tell that some of these guys, it just clicks. And obviously we named a lot of very high level players, but again, did people expect Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to be high level players when they came out of college? The answer is no. I mean, Cooper Kupp was a very good player at Eastern Washington, but I stood next to him the year he got drafted, and I thought he was either a special teamer or a specialist because he did not have the build of an NFL player. Yeah. And he doesn't run like one either, right? He's not a burner. He's not a guy that you put at the X receiver spot and have him beat press coverage, but he found a way to be successful. McVay found a way for him to be successful. It's up to AVP to find a way to get these guys successful, because once you get to the NFL, most of these guys are pretty darn talented. And if they have the work ethic, then it's up to the coaches to put them in those positions to succeed.
And that's the thing with the young receivers, is that I don't think they lack work ethic. Like, right. I know Jalen Polk, he spoke out, and obviously like some of the mental stuff, and he's made some comments that have drawn some negative attention, but he was praised for his work ethic, his personality, his leadership. And you saw that in camp. I do agree with you that there's just so much going on. I think he's just being put in a really tough spot for a 22, 23-year-old, and he's having to learn how to deal with this. And then Javon Baker, all his coaches, his high school coaches, or one of his trainers was telling me in high school he would work out before games, and he's like, bro, you can't be doing this. Like, you gotta, I appreciate it, but you gotta relax. Where that's why I was confident these guys is they have the talent, they have the work ethic to maximize it. Yeah. But it's like with Kayshawn, it's like with Pop, which is why I get so confused why people have I understand people have short-term memories, but Demario Douglas was not perfect last year. No. He was running wrong routes every single game. Sometimes it worked out because he's so talented, but every game I'm just like, oh man, is he ever going to be able to run routes consistently and not have this kind of issue? Much better this season. None of those mental errors. Kayshawn Boutte obviously got benched, but clearly wasn't doing enough and kind of checked out and did his own thing, and then completely came back with a different work ethic because he was like, I'm going to be better. And now Alex Van Pelt's calling him one of the offense's most consistent players. So we got to be patient with these young guys. Stop flooding my chat saying they got to get cut and get rid of Polk. Woosah, everybody. Breathe. It's going to be okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, you got it.
Just to add one thing to that, that's the other thing with continuity.
Yes.
Because the more you change, the more guys are going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because coaches are going to have a different vision for the same guy who just was learning a different role, and now he has to start all over again. And then you're starting to remember different routes from different systems, and it's all becoming a jumbled mess in your head. And then it's like, oh, well, you're so talented, I expect you to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And some coaches have higher EQ than others, right? Some are better at the talent evaluation than others. They bring in position coaches that, there's an old saying that I remember from the Baltimore Ravens, that when they did their scouting for rookies, and Brian Billick was still the coach, they would not talk about wide receivers in the draft because they knew that they couldn't develop them. The scouts knew that they couldn't develop them. So they would never say the positive things about the draft eligible wide receivers to Billick because they didn't want him getting attached to them and drafting somebody that the staff couldn't then develop. So that's why they had a lot of veteran receivers. This was early mid 2000s. So that's something that happens, right? You have all of these different views, all of these different techniques. So continuity matters because these guys are professionals. They'll learn. And if they can't learn, either you limit their role or you replace them. That's it. The mental burden of football is probably the biggest separator of talent, in my opinion, by far. Because if you can teach somebody to do something, teams will set you up for success. I think it's probably the easiest it's ever been to pass the football between the 20s in NFL history, right? You don't need to be a brain surgeon to run an RPO with one read. But at some point, the car hits the road and you need to be able to execute some of those more high-level plays. That's the same thing with some of these systems, right? They're really good with the play action, with the scheming, but then you have to ask these guys to drop back, 3rd and 8, Can they move? Can they read? Can they go to their third progression when teams are showing all their disguises of, they're spinning up cover 2, they're rolling down cover 3. That's different. So I think that's the mental side of things that really, like, there are a lot of quarterbacks who are physically able to play football, right? Like, you see guys with arms and can run and can do all those things, but they can't pass the test when it comes to calling plays, to reading defenses and remembering all of those things.
And the position they put you in, like, how many renaissances are we seeing at quarterback right now with all these guys who were super talented, but they were in systems where either they had so little help, they just kind of were flamed out and obviously needed to reset, or, there's just a litany of reasons for that. And then also, to your point from earlier, just about consistency. Say what you want about Tyquan Thornton. Injury prone, yes. Maybe shouldn't have been drafted where he was, sure. The guy had 3 different offensive coordinators in 3 seasons. And then the second year, everyone's like, oh my God, he can't run a route. Yeah, the kid's head's probably swimming because not only has he not been on the field, he's learning different offenses, right? Because Matt Patricia completely threw McDaniel's playbook out the window because Belichick didn't want any remnant of Josh McDaniels in the building. We don't have to get into that, but absolutely great points there. But again, we talked about a lot of the good things about this roster. Now we also have to address not the holes. We know this roster is full of holes, but what has disappointed you about the Patriots roster thus far? Whether it's acquisitions that didn't work out, whether it's players on the roster you expected more from, they haven't lived up to. What are your thoughts there?
I think it's kind of a twofold thing. I think we knew that the cornerback room had some weaknesses to it. I was hoping more from Marco Wilson, and I was hoping a little bit more versatility and usage from Jonathan Jones, because I think just in general, you see that declining foot speed. His lateral athleticism was never the strongest thing for him, but he was a very smart guy. And I thought he was a really good slot guy, as a zone slot, as sometimes as a matchup player. Not seeing that as much. We've seen a little bit more in current week, so that's been a trending positive. But I think that was a source of frustration earlier in the season. I think just I was surprised by the toughness of the defensive line early. That has shifted. Gaccio has definitely figured himself out. I thought there was some moments that I think even he talked about that he wasn't playing up to his own standards.
Jacksonville especially, yeah.
Yeah. And, taking that and really not letting that roll into multiple weeks. So I think just some of those things, like, they're a middle of the road defense. They very much remind me of 2013.
Yeah.
The one difference, I think the biggest difference, is that they don't have that leader at linebacker because Bentley is hurt. And because they still had Hightower, they had Collins, they had Spikes, they had 3 guys there, but they had the one corner. It was Aqib Talib, the press man corner, who could do a lot for you. And that is exactly who Christian Gonzalez has been. And then you had Alfonso Denard and Stephen Gregory and some of these other guys, and they were a bad third down team. They were a middle of the road team in general, and they were kind of soft in the middle. And that was an area that I see a lot of back and forth. And I think I'm used to better cognitive play by the middle of the defense. And I think that's the biggest decline from Belichick, is that I just think some of them are guessing a little bit more. I think whether it be Tavai, because he has to play a little bit more aggressive downhill to try and compensate for some of the guys who have been rotating in, who are playing their butts off, but are just not as stout as you'd like in some of those 2 gapping roles. Some of them might be better fits as just true, 3 tech or 1 techs rather than trying to hold the point in some of those spots. But I think there's just a little bit more pressing than I'd like. And I think that's the big thing for me on the defensive side. Offensively, the fact that they can't get any push is just so frustrating. I mean, they, against 6-man boxes, I shared this stat with you, since Drake May took over, they are averaging 2.8 yards per attempt. The league average is 4.7 against light boxes. So whether they have an advantage, a disadvantage, a 6-man box, 7-man box, 8-man box, it doesn't really matter. They're averaging 0.2 yards before contact in neutral situations.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's not acceptable. Part of that's running back, right? If you're running stretch, if you're trying to run toss, if you're trying to do those things and you're just not getting the blocking cut off in those spaces. But it doesn't matter which direction. If you're running up the middle, the only thing that has been impactful for them is the quarterback scrambles. And, the zone read tags have not been frequent. Maybe they want to limit that for Drake. They want to have him take less hits. They don't want to subject him to that. But you see it all the time. These guys are flying around the edge against Jacobs, against Lowe, against whoever's playing out there, even on Wino when he was playing right tackle because of his foot speed. And these guys who are unblocked or are supposed to be blocked and are just not on these inside runs, they're blowing up plays. So, I think that's the biggest disappointment. I expected more. Obviously, you have 2 backups on the interior and you have 4 backups on the offensive line, and they're holding it down decently in the pass game. But the fact that they can't get any push whatsoever, even on gap scheme when you have a 345-pound right guard, is, to me, it's just unacceptable. And I know they tried it with Leighton. They tried it with So, and the pass protection suffered. But I feel like there are ways that they could do more gap scheme, more pulling guards, anything to try and get these guys on the move and try and cause some linebacker confusion. So that's part roster and that's part coaches not responding to it.
And I think we're starting to see Van Pelt try to adjust to some of that. Like, we're seeing more motion in different ways, like Hunter Henry on the kind of, not exactly escort, but you see he's at least trying to give him an advantage on some of those duo runs. Even so, like Austin Hooper, there was a bootleg where he pretended that he was going to come in line to block and actually went out in the flat. And then it feels like they are using more of the downhill stuff. I think Alex Van Pelt acknowledged last week, sometimes you want to do one thing, but your players, you have to do something else. So it's more like, especially their shotgun run game, a lot more Michael Jordan pulling. You're seeing a lot more duo and inside zone. So we're starting to get there. But I agree. It's just a trench play in general. Like, I'd say the secondary, there's been some miscommunications, especially with Marcus Jones. But it's his first time being a full-time starter. They got a lot of safeties rotating in. You kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, but especially Jelani Tavai. Like, how often do we DM about, like, why can't anybody on this team robot? For anybody who doesn't know, robot is when basically against play action and someone's behind you, but you basically, instead of just drifting back, you turn and you try to find that guy and break up the pass. So many times I've seen the linebackers turn around and look confused, and it's like, no, there's someone there. Keep looking. Like, You got to go somewhere, because if you turn around, you're not defending anybody. So everything in the front on both sides of the ball, I'd agree, has been really disappointing. I would just love to see what this coaching staff can do, especially Scott Peters, when he's got a bunch of veterans who can actually kind of learn from what he's doing and be more competitive, because they don't even just have experience, they have starting caliber talent. And then obviously in the defensive front with Barmore and Juwan Bentley back, obviously that's more of a next year thing for both of them, but they are obviously massive, massive difference makers as well.
Yeah. And I think they did add some speed, right? Christian Ellis is not the fastest player in the world, but he was a 4.58 guy coming out of Idaho. So, I mean, like, there's some athleticism that has been lacking because Tavai is not that guy. Bentley is not that guy. And, at least Ellis brings some juice and he brings some energy. The coverage stuff, you're still going to suffer there, but I think the run defense has improved a little bit with him just kind of firing away at those gaps. And, sometimes you do that. And I think one of the things that is probably indicative of all this youth is that they don't do any quarters. They don't really do any cover 6. They don't do cover 3 match. They are a primarily cover 1 team. They do a good amount of cover 2 and a good amount of cover 3, country cover 3. Obviously, they do checks and they do all sorts of things, but I think they are kind of following the approach of keep it simple, stupid. With and that's good. I think there are areas that they can improve. Right? We talked about the cover 2 stuff, the spinning it up. That it's fine, but not if you compromise your defense. And Jim Schwartz was a guy who loved that way back in the day in Detroit and in Philly. And it was just like, this never works. This is the play. Like, invert 2 was like the running meme of like, don't do this because it's going to result in a big play. But I'd love to see more robbers and just putting guys a little bit more in the middle of the field from that open look in those spot dropping roles. Like, we don't need to add more processing to their plate necessarily. I think there are ways that they can do that just they're exploring. And I think that's back to the original question about them being positive. I think that we have seen those evolutions rather than them stagnating and just seeing a decline. We're seeing, an improvement here, improvement there. Yeah. Oh, well, this guy is a, 6th string defensive player and he's playing. Okay. Well, that's fine if he can't deliver on this one thing, but you at least see them trying those things. Their heels are not entrenched like someone who's been in
Mhm.
been in a coaching role for 50 years, 40 years, 30 years. Not saying that Belichick was, because he adopted so many different things on the defensive side, but you see those guys who just kind of, this is who they are. That's who,
Yeah.
this is who they've always been. And I think these guys are moldable enough that they at least are trying out new things, because what's the pressure?
Exactly.
Right?
And I really think that they don't get enough credit, especially on defense. I've heard people say that they haven't made any adjustments when like they've changed their base defense, where it used to be big nickel most of the time, and then it literally turned to base. They changed Keon White's role. They got rid of Raekwon McMillan and Marco Wilson when they were consistently proving to be liabilities. Even the cover two, the inverted stuff, you don't see a whole lot of that anymore. They were doing it a ton earlier in the season. Now it's more the cover two that we expect from them. They've gotten away from the Mike McDonald stuff they were trying. So I am just excited to see what everyone on the staff can do with the second season. Which Rod Mayo mentioned, just like with players, the second year is big because you can look at all your mistakes. You can really get a bird's eye view and really understand. It's so hard when you're in the eye of the storm. Then when you're outside of it, okay, what did we do that consistently showed up that we didn't notice? And then we see how they actually develop when they have more runway to do it. Andre, I don't know, I've taken so much of your time, brother. So I'm going to close out with this, all right?
Okay.
What improvements would you like to see from the Patriots on both sides of the ball for the rest of the season? And what are your expectations for the rest of the way?
Oh, okay. Okay, offense. I want to see more of those. I want to see more playmaking from the guys who are not getting those snaps right now. I want to see some sets where you're just going a little bit fast, where you have, we talked about this. I said, imagine a world where you have Haas wide juke. For those of you who know the play, then great. If you don't, it's hitch seam on the other side, and then the tight end basically gets open over the middle of the field. So it's a pretty traditional play. It's a staple of Josh McDaniels and Patriots, and they've run it a ton from empty. I would love to see a Marcus Jones and a tight end like a Jaheim Bell on one side. So you have that screen possibility out there, and you have the seam from Bell. So you have a physical player who can run a seam or block in 2-on-2 situations, and Jones has to make one man miss. And then you have Hunter Henry, and then you have someone like a Pop Douglas or a Javon Baker and a Boutte, where you have some speed on the other side where you're threatening. So you can basically run out of that. You have your Haas wide juke. You have your wide receiver screens to both directions. You have verticals. You have all sorts of things that you can do, maneuver, mesh, all sorts of fun stuff. QB draw, even from that empty set. So that's something I'd like to see. I'd like to see as much creativity as possible to give guys live reps in a role that they might be able to perform in the future. I think that's for both sides. I want to see Jonathan Jones free safety, full-time free safety. I want to see that. I don't want it to be one of those rotational things where he's playing a deep half just because it's cover two and he's they're disguising it. I want to see what he can do as a robber. I want to see what he can do as a deep middle, because I have foreseen him going the Devin McCourty route for a long time as he has started that decline. What is the harm in trying some of these things, preparing these guys in this way, where it's like, we need to make decisions on our roster already for next year. Who's sticking around? Who is not? Which veterans are coming back? The veterans are going to start showing physical decline anyway at this point in the year. Get some of those young guys in. Preserve their bodies, right? I think it's a bit of a misnomer that veterans will just decline over an off season, right? Like you see these guys where it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's getting up there in years, so he's going to be bad to start the season. And then he's not. And like, oh, he hasn't declined at all. And then it's by week 10, it's week 12, week 14. Right. Drew Brees, notorious. It was pass number 250 in a season, his last 3 years, that he started to decline. Because how many throws have you made over the course of the camp, preseason, everything, practice? That number probably was closer to about 600 on his arm from the start to that point. And that's when he started showing physical decline. You see it with corners. They start becoming less physical. They lose a step over time. So these guys, as you're getting older and we're reaching this back half of the season, we don't need to subject them to such high snap counts. Get some of these young guys in here. Let them see what they can do, knowing that these guys will be back next year. But let's end on a high note with them and figure out what everybody can do. So when the next season rolls around, we know exactly who's a role player, who's a starter, and what can they do and what can we expand on when the spring comes.
I think the coaching staff's on the same page. Alex Van Pelt said, hey, there's a fine line between giving guys a break and giving them reps, but we're rolling with these young guys because we think they have futures in the NFL. And then on defense, I think they kind of just have to do it because of attrition. And obviously so many young guys have already had to step up. They kind of established some roles that you'd like to see them continue to perform throughout the rest of the season. Andre, this was a blast as always, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Wow, just in the nick of time too. So though, please, for anybody who's not familiar, let them know where they can find you, what cool stuff you might have coming down the pipeline that we should be looking out for.
Don't know if I have anything cool coming down the pipeline. I might end up dipping from social media if something really cool comes around. But you can find me on X at Moonlight Swami, Moonlight and then SWAMI.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you so much once again for your time. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.
Peace.